Good morning, Ada Bulldogs. Welcome back. We have our fourth lesson for Focus 3. We're excited to be with you, and I gotta say I'm excited to have Mr. Montel here with us. Mr. Montel has studied this as much, if not more, than anybody on this campus, and I'm really excited to hear some of the things he's gonna share with us today. So let's get started. We know that we are, as I said, on our fourth lesson, and there's three concepts that we've covered so far. We started off with the performance pathway. We talked about culture and what the culture of an organization looked like. We talked about leadership, driving culture, behavior to results, and we talked about this circle right here. We also talked about the R factor, what Tim Kite calls the formula for life. And the third thing we talked about last week was discipline versus default, and this right here that we call the line, and being above or below the line. So right now, your teacher's going to pause the video, and I want you to talk to an elbow partner, to talk to somebody next to you about what each of these means, and explain those to each other in your own words. And then when you're done, I want you to raise your hand, somebody from your group, and share which one that you felt the most comfortable with talking about, the one you felt like you knew the best. So at this time, your teacher's going to pause the video and then do a little bit of a share out after your discussion with a partner on each one of these concepts. Welcome back. I wish I could have been there to hear some of those discussions, and I'm sure we talked a lot about how leadership drives culture, culture drives behavior, and behavior gets results. If we want to have the best school we can have, and we want to have the best activities and teams and perform the best as individuals, we have to focus on leadership. And that culture drives that leadership, which tells us how to behave, and that's how we get the outcomes we want. We've talked about the R factor, that the most important thing and the only thing we control is our response to a situation. We can't control the events, and so we have to give our best response to go after those outcomes. And then what we talked a lot about last week that we're going to build on today is discipline and default. So when I go and try to give my best response to a situation, I want to be in this disciplined mindset. I want to be above the line. I want to be intentional, on purpose, and skillful. I don't want to be down here in default and be acting in an impulsive way, on autopilot, or resistant. And today, we're going to focus on one of the toughest and most natural ways to respond in default. And that is called BCD. You're going to see BCD different spots in the building with a big X through it. And what BCD stands for is that it's an acronym for blame, complain, and defend. And Tim Kite always says that BCD never solved anything, never made a situation better. But the important thing to remember is it's naturally what we do. When we face adversity and something goes wrong, we want to blame somebody else, complain about the situation, or defend and explain why it wasn't our fault. That is something that we have to resist, and Mr. Montel is going to talk to us a little bit about how to do that.
So, like Dr. Lee said, the first thing we want to do, like our initial response is we want to push it off on somebody else. And so to avoid that, to be above the line and be disciplined, we want to start first with our minds. It's a mindset first. Because if we're not thinking about the way we want to respond, if we're not intentional about the way we want to respond, we're going to slip into the default, which was not on purpose, right? It's just spew it out, say whatever you think right away, and then our skill set doesn't grow. So we're going to go mindset first. We're going to be super intentional. We're going to think about what we want to say ahead of time. We're going to know how we're going to respond to a situation ahead of time, and we're not going to BCD. We're going to stay above the line, and that's going to impact our skill set. Some examples?
Yeah. One thing that, and I want to build a little bit on what Mr. Montel said. The other cool thing about that is if I go into it and I say, my mindset's going to be, I'm not going to blame, complain, and defend. When something goes wrong, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to respond in a way where I'm going to be a problem solver and I'm going to make things around me better. The cool thing that happens is that as I do that, I get better at it. Just like anything, if I go out and practice something, I get better at that. And so if I practice responses that aren't BCD, If I instead try to come up with creative solutions, try to build the people up around me, be a leader and try to fix things, if I do those things, then I'm going to get better and better and better at that skill set and doing those things. Mr. Montel's got a good example of being in a basketball game. Mr. Montel was a big-time basketball player, and he's going to give you an example about how in a basketball game you might deal with a tough situation and you could choose to respond with BCD, or you could be above the line.
Right, so here's an example that when you think about this, it's going to happen, right? And most events in our life, we can sort of predict them. We can predict some of the big things that are going to happen to us. And so all of us Bulldogs, we want to try and come up with ways that we're going to think about this ahead of time. So here's an example. If I'm a basketball player and I'm one of the better players on the team, I know I'm going to get keyed on, or the other team's going to try and get after me more. I'm going to get fouled in a game, and it's probably not going to get called. There's going to be a few times it's not going to get called. So if I know this ahead of time, if my mindset is you're going to go up for a shot sometime, you're going to get fouled, they're not going to call it, then I have to apply the skill set. So mindset, you're going to get fouled. I think then, what's the outcome I want out of this as a basketball player? I want to win the game. That's a long-term goal. So how can I help my team win this game? Well, if I go off, make a face and give the official a hard time, first of all, I'm probably going to get technical. I'm probably going to sit on the bench. Things that are not going to help my team. Now, conversely, mindset, I know I'm going to get fouled. Ahead of time, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to go back. I'm going to be a stopper. I'm going to turn into a defensive stopper. I'm going to get the ball, and we're going to score on them again. So we're going to stop them, and if I tell myself that ahead of time, it's so much easier than to make that choice in a game. It's not about me anymore. It's about my team, right? And helping the team. So that mindset becomes a skill set because I've thought about it ahead of time.
That's exactly right. And as Mr. Montel does that over and over again, what happens here? His team sees it and they go, oh, that's how we react when we get fouled. We're tough about it. We keep playing hard. We don't let it rattle us. We respond in a way where we're not going to let it shake us. We're going to keep playing the way we need to play to win. And that becomes the culture of the team. And that skill set develops. I think about it, we were talking about it in the sense of a group project. You're going to be in a group project probably this year, probably this month, probably this week, where you know that at some point it's going to be hard to work with someone else, or you're going to feel like you're doing more work than everyone else, right? You can go straight to BCD. You can blame them. They're not doing a good enough job. Complain. I can't believe I got put in their group. Defend. Well, I do everything right. They don't do anything right. But that won't solve anything. But if you instead respond and say, hey, what could I do to help that other person maybe do something else in the project that they could do well at? Or is there something they don't understand that I could explain to them? Or is there a resource they need? Or do I need to encourage them? Or do I need to show them that, hey, here, let me help you with that? All those responses are going to help solve the situation. So what Mr. Montel and I want you to do right now, your teacher's going to pause the video, and all we're going to have is a little open discussion about this mindset skill set and this new concept of BCD. What do you take from it? What you've heard so far about blame, complain, defend, is that something that you see happen around you? And how do you think having the right mindset can build the right skill set? Go ahead and have that discussion. Okay, from there, we want to talk about some other key concepts. And I really like how Mr. Montel relates blame, complain, defend to outcome. Remember, we talked about that outcome as what we're looking to do. Our response is to try to get that outcome. So Mr. Montel is going to share a little bit about how outcome relates to BCD.
So when you're approached with any event, you can slip straight to the default. You can slip straight into blaming, complaining, and defending, right? Which is really default stuff. Or when you think about this, you think about, as a problem solver, you're going to jump over your response and you're going to go straight to, what outcome do I want? What do I really want out of this situation? And there's a myriad of examples, but if we just go all the way to the outcome I want, then all of a sudden, if I think about the outcome I want, I'm probably thinking more about, let's go back to the basketball analogy, I'm thinking more about the outcome I want to win the game. And so instead of me blowing up, outcome says, I want to win the game, I go up to, who am I talking about? My team. What feelings am I having right now? Or what self-talk? I gotta get back, I gotta hustle. I know I got fouled, I gotta get back. Then, what are my feelings? Tenacity, intensity, grit, as Dr. Lee says, right? All of those are pre-thought. I'm thinking about those ahead of time. Then I slip into, now's my response. So, what outcome do you want is crucial to what response you're going to have. If I go to this with a default response, yeah, blame, complain, defend. Ref called a foul on me. I go home that night, right? I mean, I did everything right. Right? I mean, so blame, complain, defend is natural, but what outcome do I want? Then all of a sudden I'm thinking about my team. If I go here, I'm thinking about me.
And I love that example because it's so easy to see how it's natural to respond with blame, complain, defend, but it's definitely doing nothing to get the outcome that you want. The other thing that we already mentioned here real quick is we talked about that basketball analogy, or we talked about that group work example, and we talked about that. And this is something from earlier, and you all remember me saying, this is a saying I love that Tim Kite says is, your R is an E for others. Your response is an event for other people. And so if the team sees you respond and say, hey, he just kept playing hard, he's not complaining, he's going to keep playing hard, it's not going to faze him, then they go, oh, that's an event for them. That motivates them. That's leadership for them to move in the right direction. Same thing with your group work. A group can feel when stuff's not going right, or maybe people aren't getting along. And if you respond without blaming, complaining, or defending, but you lead in a positive direction, you're setting up the people around you to be successful as well. You're being a good E for them to help them be successful. So one of the last things we're going to talk about here with BCD is something that Mr. Montel is going to share that he tries to do to really get into that mindset every day to put himself in a position to not BCD.
Guys, I'm so passionate about this no BCD. Now, do I ever BCD? I do. Dr. Lee, I do sometimes, and especially at home, right? Like when I'm at work, and you guys are at school, you can control a little bit better. When I go home, sometimes I do. What happens is the more you think about it, the more you aware of it you are, the easier it is to push it and think about the result you want. So for me, I start each day and I say to myself, I have a behavior, belief, and outcome like we have, right? And so one of mine for me today is I can only control my responses. I say that out loud every morning. And then what's the behavior that goes with that? I will not BCD. I'm going to solve problems today. And I tell myself that every day. And it might seem a little bit hokey, but I'm telling you guys, it comes into play then when a first grader comes up to me and I just gave really good directions, I thought, right? And they don't, could you explain this again? You know, if I BCD, I'm just crushing the kid, right? So I'm going to solve. I'm going to say, hey, I wonder what I did wrong. I wonder what I missed that I could have helped this kid. So guys, practice this. Practice this on your own. In the morning, just get up and say, it's going to be a great day. I am not going to complain. No BCD. I'm going to solve problems today. And I guarantee you, it's going to make a difference for you.
And that's such a good point about taking that purposeful action. One thing Tim Kite talks a lot about is ideas are great, but execution is what matters. And so can we execute this? We can all look at BCD and say, we don't want to be those people. We don't want to be those people walking around negativity, blame, complain, defend, and we get that doesn't fix anything. But the question is, how do we execute? And it's key that we have that at the forefront of our mindset that we talked about earlier, and you got to have a purposeful way to do that. I think that's a great way to go about that and keep that at the forefront of your mind. And the last thing we're going to leave y'all with before you talk as a group one more time is when we get away from this BCD, we go from being impulsive, I'm reacting in an emotional, negative, not productive way, to being intentional. I'm making things better around me. I'm being that leader that we need to build that culture to drive the behavior to get the results. If I'm BCDing, I'm focused on myself. I'm being selfish, and normally I'm being negative. Immediately, how much do we know when we face adversity, our mind goes, oh no, how's this going to impact me? And I bet it's going to go all these bad ways. We have to fight that voice. That's that BCD voice. Instead, we have to think about others, think about positivity. One makes us frustrated and selfish. One makes us curious and empathetic, looking out for the people around us. This BCD is something that's natural, but it's something that if we can push it away, and we can have a stronger, better R, then that's going to be a difference maker for us and be a difference maker for our culture as a school. So at this time, okay, your teacher's going to pause the video and you're going to just talk a little bit about, with a partner, an example of when you BCD versus when you react with purpose. Think about a real example in your own life for, here's a time when I have a tendency to BCD, or here's a time when I have been purposeful and had that strong R. And how do the outcomes change based on that, based on those two very, very different R's. So at this time, your teacher's going to pause the video. All right, thank you, Ada Bulldogs. Thank you, Mr. Montel. Next week, we're going to start the R Factor disciplines. And the first one we're going to talk about, and one of my favorites, is press pause. So I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for your attention. No BCD. Let's have the best R Factor today we can.
Go Dogs.